Hello everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're from and what time it is. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories like this. Now, let the shadows take over. When you grow up in a small suburb in Ohio, babysitting is almost like a requirement. By the time you're 16 or 17, you've usually spent dozens of nights sitting on someone else's couch while their kids sleep upstairs. It's supposed to be easy money. You watch TV, eat snacks from the pantry, maybe text your friends, and most of the time, nothing happens. That's what I thought the night I agreed to babysit for the Whitakers. They lived on Fairview Lane, just 2 streets over from my house. It was the kind of neighborhood that still had block parties in the summer and plastic Santas on every lawn in December. Safe, normal, predictable. The Whitakers had 2 kids, Ava, 9, and Michael, 6. Both were sweet, polite, and easy to handle. I'd watched them a few times already, and Mrs. Whitaker always paid well. That Friday night in late October, she and her husband had a dinner with friends and asked if I could stay until midnight. I said yes without thinking twice. I got there around 6:30. The air was crisp, the street glowing orange under the fall leaves. Mrs. Whitaker greeted me at the door, fixing her earrings, while Mr. Whitaker grabbed his coat. She went over the usual stuff. Mac and cheese in the fridge. Kids' bedtime around 8:30. Emergency numbers by the phone. You'll be fine, she said with a smile. They love you. Ava and Michael came running to the door already in their pajamas. Ava had a stack of books in her hands. Read me 2 tonight, not 1, she begged. Michael roared like a dinosaur and nearly tripped over his blanket. I laughed and promised both kids I'd read until they were too sleepy to keep their eyes open. By 7:30, we'd eaten dinner, spilled some juice, and watched a cartoon. By 8:15, I had them upstairs with teeth brushed and tucked in. Ava insisted I leave her door open just an inch so the hall nightlight could shine through. Michael wanted his door closed all the way so the dinosaurs couldn't see him. Both were asleep before 9 o'clock. The house settled into silence. I curled up on the couch with my phone, half scrolling TikTok, half trying to get through some math homework. The living room was cozy, dimly lit by the lamp in the corner. The street outside was quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. That was when the phone rang. Not my cell phone. The house landline on the end table. The shrill ring startled me. I picked it up quickly, expecting maybe the Whitakers. Hello. Silence. Mrs. Whitaker? I said, lowering my voice. Still nothing. Then a faint click and the line went dead. I told myself it was a wrong number. People barely used landlines anymore. Probably some telemarketer. I went back to my phone. But 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time when I picked up, I heard breathing. Slow, steady. Hello, I said, my voice sharper. The breathing stopped. Then a low voice whispered, "Don't go upstairs." My heart skipped. Who is this? I demanded. Click. Line dead. I stood there gripping the phone, every hair on my arms raised. Some stupid prank, I thought. Someone from school messing around. Tyler lived down the block. He and his friends were always pulling stunts. Maybe they thought it would be funny to mess with me. I checked the locks on the front and back doors, closed the blinds, and forced myself back onto the couch. At 9:40, the phone rang again. This time, the voice was even lower, almost a growl. They're not alone up there. I felt my blood go cold. Ava and Michael were asleep upstairs. My first thought was to run up and check, but my legs wouldn't move. My mind raced with possibilities. What if someone had broken in? What if they were in the kids' rooms right now? I grabbed the cordless phone and crept up the stairs, heart hammering. The hallway was dim. The nightlight was casting just enough glow to see. Ava's door was cracked open like I'd left it. I pushed it open. She was curled under her blanket, breathing softly. Michael was across the hall clutching his dinosaur, sound asleep. Both safe, both alone. Relief hit me like a wave. Maybe it was a prank call after all. Maybe. The phone rang again, loud in my hand. I nearly dropped it but forced myself to answer. This time the voice was laughing. Raspy, broken, like it hurt him to breathe. "I can see you." I spun around, looking around the hallway. Empty, silent. That's when I noticed it. The attic door at the end of the hall. It was cracked open just an inch, but enough to see the dark gap. I knew for certain I hadn't touched it. I froze, staring. Every nerve in my body was screaming to run. My mouth went dry. I backed away slowly, whispering into the phone. "If you're in this house, I'm calling the cops." The man's laugh got deeper. Then he whispered, "You should." The line went dead. I grabbed both kids out of their beds, whispering urgently, "Come on, we're going downstairs." Ava stirred, confused. But when she saw my face, she didn't argue. Michael clutched his dinosaur tighter. I led them into the living room, locked every door again, and huddled on the couch with them pressed against me. At 10:15, the phone rang once more. I almost didn't answer, but I couldn't stand the sound. The whisper was right against my ear. "Too late. I'm already inside." The kids whimpered. I pressed them close, trying not to cry. Then I heard it. A floorboard creaking from upstairs, right above us. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving toward the stairs. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers, telling the operator that someone was in the house. She told me to stay calm, stay quiet. Officers were on their way, but the footsteps were already coming down. I pulled the kids into the kitchen and locked the door, whispering for them not to make a sound. Ava's hand clutched mine so tightly it hurt. Michael's eyes were wide with tears. Through the thin wood of the door, I heard the footsteps pause. Then a whisper, "Don't go upstairs." The doorknob rattled violently. I screamed. The kids cried. Then a thud. Someone throwing their weight against the door. The operator's voice buzzed in my ear. "Stay calm. Officers are 2 minutes out." The pounding stopped. Silence. I held my breath, every muscle trembling. Ava buried her face in my side. Michael whimpered. Then slowly the footsteps went back. Back through the hall, back up the stairs. I heard the creak of the attic door closing. Less than a minute later, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Police rushed inside, checking the house. I ran out, holding the kids, sobbing with relief. They searched every room. The attic, too. They found no one. But the inside of the attic door was covered in scratches. Long, desperate marks like someone had been clawing to keep it shut. The Whitakers had the locks changed. They installed a security system. They told me nothing like that had ever happened before. But I quit babysitting after that night. And even now, years later, when the phone rings late at night, I still freeze. Because in the back of my mind, I hear that
"She's
whisper
great.
again.
I can
see you," patting my shoulder. "You deserve a night out." Before they left, Mrs. Callahan gave me a baby monitor. "Keep this near you," she said, handing me the small handheld screen. "It's a video one. He usually sleeps through, but just in case." She paused, then added quietly, "If you hear him talking, don't be alarmed. He's been going through a phase, talking to himself at night. Just don't encourage it." I nodded, though something about the way she said it made me uneasy. By 8 o'clock, Noah was bathed, teeth brushed, and tucked into his crib. His room was decorated in soft blues with little animal stickers on the walls. I read him a short story, kissed his forehead, and turned on the night light. He was out in minutes. Downstairs, I settled on the couch with the monitor beside me. The screen glowed faintly, showing Noah curled in his crib. The audio was just the soft hiss of static. For the first hour, everything was fine. I scrolled my phone, snacked from the Callahan's fridge, checked the monitor every few minutes. Noah didn't move, but around 9:30, the screen flickered, just for a second. Static lines rolled down, messing up the picture. When it cleared, I froze. Noah wasn't alone. A figure stood beside the crib, tall, thin, leaning over him. My heart slammed against my chest. I ran upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. I burst into Noah's room and found him sleeping peacefully, clutching his stuffed elephant. The crib was empty except for him. No figure, no one else. I told myself it was interference. Bad connection. These cameras weren't perfect. I went back downstairs, hands trembling, and sat on the couch again. The monitor glowed innocently, showing only Noah in his crib. By 10 o'clock, I was starting to calm down. Maybe it really had been a glitch. But then the audio crackled. Static at first, then a voice. Low, male, whispering. Noah. I shot upright, staring at the monitor. Noah stirred in the crib, rolled onto his side, and mumbled something. The monitor picked it up faintly. Other mommy. I nearly dropped the device. I ran upstairs again, heart in my throat. Noah was still asleep, but his lips moved slightly like he was dreaming. The room was cold, too cold. I touched the window, locked tight, no draft. I backed out, shutting the door quietly, trying to convince myself it was just baby babble. Kids said weird things. Other mommy didn't have to mean anything. Back on the couch, I couldn't take my eyes off the monitor. 10:40, Noah sat up. The movement jolted me. He sat in his crib, eyes wide open, staring directly into the camera. Directly at me. I whispered, "Lay down, buddy." Even though he couldn't hear me, the monitor audio crackled. A whisper came through. "Let me in." Noah pointed toward the corner of his room, a dark patch just out of the camera's view. Then he lay back down, pulling the blanket over his head. I was shaking. I wanted to call the Callahans, but what would I say? That their baby monitor was haunted? That Noah had imaginary friends? By 11:15, the house felt wrong. Too still. Every creak made me jump. I carried the monitor into the kitchen, made myself some tea, tried to steady my nerves. Then the screen went black. I hit the side, thinking it had died, but the battery was full. The screen flickered back on, but it wasn't showing the crib anymore. It was showing the basement. Concrete walls, old shelves, a single bare bulb swinging from the ceiling. And in the center, Noah, standing barefoot, clutching his elephant, crying. I screamed his name and ran upstairs. I threw open his bedroom door. Empty. The crib was empty. I tore through the room, checked the closet, under the bed. Nothing. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the monitor. I ran downstairs, searching every room. Living room, kitchen, bathroom. Empty. The monitor still showed him in the basement, sobbing. But I hadn't gone down there. I didn't even know where the door was. I searched wildly until I found it. A narrow door off the laundry room. My hand hovered over the knob, heart hammering. The monitor's audio crackled. Noah's cries grew louder, echoing. "Help me," he sobbed. I threw the door open. Cold air rushed up. The basement stairs went down into darkness. I forced myself down, clutching the monitor like a flashlight. Each step creaked. The air grew damp, thick. The bulb overhead flickered weakly, barely lighting the concrete floor. And there he was. Noah stood in the middle of the basement, clutching his elephant, tears running down his cheeks. I ran and scooped him into my arms. "Oh my God! How did you get down here?" He clung to me, shaking. "Other mommy," he whispered. "Behind us." Something shifted in the shadows. I spun around. The monitor slipped from my hand, clattering on the floor. In its tiny screen, I saw movement. A tall, thin figure just at the edge of the light. Watching. I didn't wait. I ran up the stairs, Noah screaming in my arms. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it. My chest heaved. The monitor on the floor went dark. Police came minutes later after I called 911. They searched the basement. Every inch. Nothing. Just shelves, tools, dust. No sign of anyone else. But the monitor never worked again. When the Callahans came home, I handed Noah to them, still crying. I tried to explain, but they looked at me like I was crazy. "He sleepwalks sometimes," Mrs. Callahan said quietly. "We've found him in odd places. Don't worry." I wanted to scream. Sleepwalkers didn't whisper about other mommy. They didn't appear on monitors in rooms that shouldn't be connected. I quit babysitting after that. I still see Noah sometimes. His mom posts photos on Facebook. He looks older now, but his eyes, they're different, distant. She once posted about how he stopped talking altogether after that winter. Doctors called it selective mutism, said it was trauma-related. But I know the truth. He never stopped talking. He just won't talk to us. And every now and then, when a screen flickers near me, a TV, a phone, even a microwave display, for a split second, I swear I see his face staring back. Mouth open, crying, begging for someone to let him out. I was 19 when I babysat for the Carters, and I still think about that night more often than I'd like to admit. They lived in one of those narrow two-story homes at the far end of a cul-de-sac. The kind of place that always looked cheerful in daylight but seemed to sag under its own shadows once the sun went down. I only knew the Carters from saying hi. My mother was friendly with Mrs. Carter through church, and she'd mentioned once that their daughter Sophie sometimes needed a sitter when both parents worked nights. I'd taken a few local jobs already, and at the time I figured it was just another easy evening of keeping a kid fed, entertained, and in bed on time. Looking back, I think I was too quick to say yes. Sophie was 8 years old, a quiet little girl with straight brown hair that usually hung down into her face. She wasn't rude, just quiet, like she was watching the world from behind a curtain. When I first got there, she was sitting on the living room carpet with a box of crayons spread out around her, coloring with the same dull red crayon over and over. She barely looked up when I came in. Her parents, though, seemed more tense than I expected. Mrs. Carter gave me rapid-fire instructions. Homework was done. Dinner had been eaten. Sophie needed to be in bed by 9 o'clock sharp. That was all simple enough. But then she leaned closer to me and said something in a voice that made my stomach tighten. "If she gets up, don't argue. Just walk her back to bed. And if she says anything strange, don't engage." I tried to laugh it off, asking what she meant by strange, but neither of them answered. Mr. Carter just played with his keys and mumbled something about being late for his shift. They were both out the door within a minute, leaving me standing in the entryway with Sophie's faint crayon strokes scraping the paper in the next room. The house settled into a heavy quiet after that. Sophie eventually wandered into the kitchen, still dragging the red crayon with her. I tried making conversation, asking what she liked to do, whether she had a favorite show, but she only shrugged or gave one-word answers. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, Just eerie how little sound she made for a child her age. At a few minutes before 9 o'clock, I led her upstairs, helped her brush her teeth, and guided her into bed. Her room was small, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars that were peeling in places and a few stuffed animals neatly lined along the edge of the blanket. She pulled her rabbit plush close and finally gave me a faint smile when I told her good night. I shut her door to a small crack and went back downstairs, settling on the couch with my phone. For the first half hour, everything seemed perfectly normal. I scrolled social media, munched on some pretzels Mrs. Carter had left out, and let the muted TV flicker in the background. Around 9:45, though, I heard the soft patter of footsteps on the stairs. I looked up to see Sophie standing at the edge of the hallway, rabbit plush dangling from her hand. "I'm thirsty," she mumbled. I smiled, relieved at how normal the request was. I led her into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and watched her sip while blinking sleepily at me. When I walked her back upstairs, she paused in the doorway of her room and whispered, "She doesn't like it when you stay too long." A chill crept down my spine. "Who doesn't?" I asked, but Sophie only pulled her rabbit tighter and climbed back into bed without answering. I shut the door carefully, heart beating a little faster now. Kids said odd things all the time, I reminded myself. Maybe she meant a teacher or an imaginary friend or who knew what else. I forced myself back onto the couch and tried to shake it off. At 10 o'clock, the baby monitor on the end table hissed with static. It wasn't a video one, just audio, and I thought maybe it had picked up interference from a neighbor. But then through the static came a whisper. "Don't believe the one in my bed." I froze, staring at the little plastic device. My skin prickled all over. I grabbed it, pressed it to my ear, and whispered, "Hello," as though it would answer me. The static died back down, leaving only silence. I ran upstairs, heart racing. Sophie lay under her blanket, eyes closed, breathing deeply like she'd been asleep the whole time. I stood there staring at her, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard what I knew I heard. That was when I turned toward the hall and felt my blood run cold. Sophie was standing there at the far end of the hallway, rabbit in hand, staring straight at me. I stammered her name, unable to move. She tilted her head slightly, eyes glinting in the dim hall light. "Why are you looking at her?" "I'm right here." I whipped back toward the bed. The Sophie lying there opened her eyes and whispered, "She's the fake. Don't listen to her." My chest tightened so hard I thought I might pass out. Two Sophies, both moving, both talking, both saying the other wasn't real. I stumbled back toward the stairs, shaking. The one in the bed sat up, her face pale and urgent. The one in the hall stepped closer, rabbit dragging against the floor. Their voices overlapped, soft and desperate. "Don't believe her. She's lying. Choose me. I'm the real one." I wanted to scream, to run out of the house, but some part of me couldn't abandon them. Or her. Or whichever was Sophie. I backed down the hall, tears blurring my eyes. The air in the house felt wrong now. Thick, heavy, pressing against my skin. The glow stars on Sophie's ceiling flickered like they were burning out. The monitor in my hand hissed again. Over the static came the same whisper, only sharper this time. "You have to decide. We can't both stay." I gasped for breath, shaking my head. No, I don't understand. I don't want to choose." But the two girls only stared, their faces mirrors of one another, each one filled with desperate urgency. The one at the door began to cry. The one on the bed smiled faintly, almost cruelly. I felt my knees weaken. Then the lights flickered once, hard enough to plunge the hall into darkness for a heartbeat. When they came steady again, only one Sophie remained. She sat calmly on the bed, hugging her rabbit, expression unreadable. "Thank you," she whispered. I couldn't answer. I ran from the room, heart hammering, and spent the rest of the night trembling on the couch, unable to close my eyes. Every sound made me jump. At one point, I thought I saw movement in the hallway, a small figure standing just out of sight. But when I blinked, it was gone. At dawn, the Carters came home. Mrs. Carter smiled tightly, handed me cash, and asked if Sophie had gone to bed on time. My throat locked up, but I forced myself to nod. Yes, she was fine. Sophie came down the stairs then, still in pajamas, rabbit in hand. She smiled faintly at her mother before turning her gaze on me. The look she gave me was sharp, deliberate, far too old for her 8 years. My stomach twisted because I knew she wasn't the same Sophie I had tucked into bed. I left the Carters' house that morning and never went back. I stopped babysitting altogether soon after. But even now, years later, I'll catch myself in crowded places, grocery stores, malls, airports, spotting a child who looks just like Sophie. Sometimes I'll glance away and see her again in another part of the crowd, as though she's doubled, as though she's following me. And the worst part is that I'll never know which Sophie I left that night, the real one or the wrong one. People always think babysitting horror stories are about strangers breaking into houses or heavy footsteps above you when you know you're the only one home. But the night that changed how I look at children forever wasn't about an intruder at all. It was about the boy I was hired to watch. And to this day, I don't know if what I saw was him or something using him as a mask. The Walters lived in one of those carefully maintained houses at the edge of town. Pale blue shutters, trimmed hedges, porch lights that turned on automatically at dusk. Their neighborhood always looked safe, but something about their place felt staged. Like a model home nobody really lived in where everything was too perfect. The walls were white, no scuff marks, not a single family photo out of line. Even the air inside smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals, sharp enough to make me notice. Mrs. Walters answered the door in a hurry. She was dressed for a night out, hair pinned up, pearl necklace catching the light. "Thanks so much for coming on such short notice," she said, bringing me inside before I'd even set my bag down. She went through the instructions like she was reading them off a checklist. Oliver had eaten. Homework done. No TV after 7 o'clock. Bedtime at 9:30. If he wanted a snack, fruit or crackers only. She barely took a breath before waving to her husband, who was waiting in the car. I tried to ask if there was anything else I should know, but she cut me off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He's a good boy. You'll be fine." That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Oliver was sitting stiffly on the living room couch when she left. Stuffed dinosaur tucked under one arm, his other hand flat on his knee. He didn't look up when the door shut. His small face was pale. His bangs were cut in a sharp line just above his eyebrows. I smiled, introduced myself, and said, "So, Oliver, what do you want to do tonight?" He turned his head slowly, studying me like he was trying to figure out what kind of person I was. His eyes were too still for a kid his age. Then, without answering, he slid off the couch and walked to the kitchen, where he pulled out a box of crayons from a drawer like it was routine. He sat them down at the dining table, and began coloring without another word. I followed, trying to act casual. "Okay, drawing's cool. What are we making?" He didn't answer, just bent over the page, the red crayon scratching against paper. After a few minutes, he pushed the sheet toward me. It was me. I knew it was me. The hoodie, the long hair, even the couch behind me. But my eyes were black circles and red bled out from under me like a puddle. I gave a shaky laugh. "Why am I bleeding?" His voice was flat, too calm. Because that's what happens tonight. The way he said it, not like a guess, not like a joke, but as if he were stating a fact, made my skin crawl. I pushed the paper aside, forcing a smile. How about we draw something happy like your dinosaur? But he was already reaching for another sheet. This time he drew a staircase. At the top was a stick figure that looked like him, smiling wide. At the bottom was another figure, me again, sprawled out while long black arms stretched from the walls toward me. I swallowed hard, deciding not to comment. Snack time, I asked, my voice tight. For the first time, he looked directly at me and smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. His lips pulled back too far. His teeth looked too many for such a small mouth. And his eyes didn't change at all. It was practiced, forced, like he'd studied the shape of a grin but never felt what it meant. That's when I realized I wasn't just babysitting a quiet kid. Something was wrong. I distracted myself by pulling out apple slices and crackers, setting them on the counter. Oliver followed but didn't eat. He just stood there watching me, smile fading into that blank stare again. I tried to fill the silence by asking about school, favorite shows, anything. No answer. Finally, I said gently, Oliver, can you at least tell me how old you are? He didn't blink. You know I'm 6. I don't think I told you my name yet, I said, trying to shift the mood. It's Brooke. He tilted his head, and for the first time all night, his voice carried something sharp. I know your name, Brooke Miller. I froze. My last name wasn't written anywhere in the house. His parents hadn't said it. I sure hadn't. How do you know that? I whispered. His mouth stretched into that wrong smile again. They told me. Who told you? He pointed upstairs. The ones in the rooms. My stomach lurched. By 9 o'clock, I decided it was bedtime whether he argued or not. To my surprise, he went willingly. He climbed into bed with his dinosaur, tucked himself under the blanket. I pulled the door almost closed, then noticed the little hook latch high on the frame, clearly meant to keep him inside. Hesitating only a moment, I slid it shut. Felt wrong, locking him in, but something about the way he'd said, they told me, made me do it anyway. First, the house was quiet. I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, telling myself kids said creepy things all the time. But around 10 o'clock, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, creaking across the upstairs hallway. I froze, eyes locked on the ceiling. Oliver was in bed. His door was locked. The Walters were gone. The steps went back and forth, pausing, then starting again. My breath came shallow. Finally, I forced myself upstairs, every creak of the steps echoing in my ears. The latch on Oliver's door was still in place. But from inside, I heard him speaking. She doesn't believe yet. Make her believe. The words weren't in his child's voice. They were deeper, distorted, like an adult forcing his throat into a child's rhythm. Then another voice answered. It was low, guttural, too faint to make out the words, but definitely there. The latch rattled violently. I stumbled back, hand over my mouth. Heart hammering so loud I was sure they heard it. Scraping followed, nails dragging down wood. I ran downstairs, calling Mrs. Walters. Straight to voicemail. Mr. Walters's phone too. I tried my mom, but the call cut off before it rang. The air in the house buzzed with static. Faint but there, like a TV on in another room. The noises above went on for half an hour. Footsteps pacing, voices murmuring, the scrape of something dragging across the floor. Then silence. At 11:30, I couldn't stand it anymore. Trembling, I unlatched his door and peeked in. Oliver lay in bed, dinosaur clutched to his chest, breathing deep, peaceful, perfect. Relief surged through me. I almost laughed at myself for being so worried. I started to close the door when his voice cut through the dark. "Good night, Brooke Miller." My head snapped toward him. His eyes were wide open, fixed on me. That smile stretched again, wider, teeth gleaming faintly in the glow of the nightlight. I slammed the door, heart pounding, and spent the rest of the night on the couch, too terrified to blink. Every creak of the house felt like it was inching closer. At one point, I glanced at the hallway and swore I saw him standing at the top of the stairs, watching. But when I blinked, the space was empty. When the Walters finally came home past midnight, I nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Walters thanked me, gave me cash, and didn't even notice how pale I was. As I turned to leave, Oliver walked down the stairs, rabbit under his arm. "Mommy," he said sweetly, hugging her. She kissed his head, but then his face turned toward me. His lips moved silently just for me to see. "Next time, I'll keep you." I walked home shaking so hard I thought my knees would buckle. I quit babysitting within a week, but sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see a smile tugging at my lips. Wide, stretched, unnatural, even when I'm not smiling at all. I never believed a house could feel alive until the night I babysat in one that refused to let me leave. People tell me I must have imagined it or that stress warped my memory. But I know what I saw, and what I felt pressing in on me that night wasn't something a human built. It was something that wanted me. The Holloways had only lived in that farmhouse for a couple of months. It sat far from the main road, hidden behind a line of trees. Its roof pitched sharp against the sky like a crooked grin. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the porch light flickered once, then stayed on. It looked normal enough in daylight. White siding, 2 chimneys, a wide porch swing. But as the sun slipped behind the woods, the shadows seemed to stretch farther than they should have, swallowing the corners of the house. Mrs. Holloway met me at the door, rushing as she put on her earrings. "And if she says anything strange, don't engage." I tried to laugh it off, asking what she meant by strange, but neither of them answered. Mr. Carter just played with his keys and mumbled something about being late for his shift. They were both out the door within a minute, leaving me standing in the entryway with Sophie's faint crayon strokes scraping the paper in the next room. The house settled into a heavy quiet after that. Sophie eventually wandered into the kitchen, still dragging the red crayon with her. I tried making conversation, asking what she liked to do, whether she had a favorite show, but she only shrugged or gave one-word answers. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, just eerie how little sound she made for a child her age. At a few minutes before 9 o'clock, I led her upstairs, helped her brush her teeth, and guided her into bed. Her room was small, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars that were peeling in places and a few stuffed animals neatly lined along the edge of the blanket. She pulled her rabbit plush close and finally gave me a faint smile when I told her good night. I shut her door to a small crack and went back downstairs, settling on the couch with my phone. For the first half hour, everything seemed perfectly normal. I scrolled social media, munched on some pretzels Mrs. Carter had left out, and let the muted TV flicker in the background. Around 9:45, though, I heard the soft patter of footsteps on the stairs. I looked up to see Sophie standing at the edge of the hallway, rabbit plush dangling from her hand. "I'm thirsty," she mumbled. I smiled, relieved at how normal the request was. I led her into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and watched her sip while blinking sleepily at me. When I walked her back upstairs, she paused in the doorway of her room and whispered, "She doesn't like it when you stay too long." A chill crept down my spine. "Who doesn't?" I asked, But Sophie only pulled her rabbit tighter and climbed back into bed without answering. I shut the door carefully, heart beating a little faster now. Kids said odd things all the time, I reminded myself. Maybe she meant a teacher or an imaginary friend or who knew what else. I forced myself back onto the couch and tried to shake it off. At 10 o'clock, the baby monitor on the end table hissed with static. It wasn't a video one, just audio, and I thought maybe it had picked up interference from a neighbor. But then through the static came a whisper. "Don't believe the one in my bed." I froze, staring at the little plastic device. My skin prickled all over. I grabbed it, pressed it to my ear, and whispered, "Hello," as though it would answer me. The static died back down, leaving only silence. I ran upstairs, heart racing. Sophie lay under her blanket, eyes closed, breathing deeply like she'd been asleep the whole time. I stood there staring at her, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard what I knew I heard. That was when I turned toward the hall and felt my blood run cold. Sophie was standing there at the far end of the hallway, rabbit in hand, staring straight at me. I stammered her name, unable to move. She tilted her head slightly, eyes glinting in the dim hall light. "Why are you looking at her?" "I'm right here." I whipped back toward the bed. The Sophie lying there opened her eyes and whispered, "She's the fake. Don't listen to her." My chest tightened so hard I thought I might pass out. Two Sophies, both moving, both talking, both saying the other wasn't real. I stumbled back toward the stairs, shaking. The one in the bed sat up, her face pale and urgent. The one in the hall stepped closer, rabbit dragging against the floor. Their voices overlapped, soft and desperate. "Don't believe her. She's lying. Choose me. I'm the real one." I wanted to scream, to run out of the house, but some part of me couldn't abandon them. Or her. Or whichever was Sophie. I backed down the hall, tears blurring my eyes. The air in the house felt wrong now. Thick, heavy, pressing against my skin. The glow stars on Sophie's ceiling flickered like they were burning out. The monitor in my hand hissed again. Over the static came the same whisper, only sharper this time. "You have to decide. We can't both stay." I gasped for breath, shaking my head. No, I don't understand. I don't want to choose." But the two girls only stared, their faces mirrors of one another, each one filled with desperate urgency. The one at the door began to cry. The one on the bed smiled faintly, almost cruelly. I felt my knees weaken. Then the lights flickered once, hard enough to plunge the hall into darkness for a heartbeat. When they came steady again, only one Sophie remained. She sat calmly on the bed, hugging her rabbit, expression unreadable. "Thank you," she whispered. I couldn't answer. I ran from the room, heart hammering, and spent the rest of the night trembling on the couch, unable to close my eyes. Every sound made me jump. At one point, I thought I saw movement in the hallway, a small figure standing just out of sight. But when I blinked, it was gone. At dawn, the Carters came home. Mrs. Carter smiled tightly, handed me cash, and asked if Sophie had gone to bed on time. My throat locked up, but I forced myself to nod. Yes, she was fine. Sophie came down the stairs then, still in pajamas, rabbit in hand. She smiled faintly at her mother before turning her gaze on me. The look she gave me was sharp, deliberate, far too old for her 8 years. My stomach twisted because I knew she wasn't the same Sophie I had tucked into bed. I left the Carters' house that morning and never went back. I stopped babysitting altogether soon after. But even now, years later, I'll catch myself in crowded places, grocery stores, malls, airports, spotting a child who looks just like Sophie. Sometimes I'll glance away and see her again in another part of the crowd, as though she's doubled, as though she's following me. And the worst part is that I'll never know which Sophie I left that night. The real one or the wrong one. People always think babysitting horror stories are about strangers breaking into houses or heavy footsteps above you when you know you're the only one home. But the night that changed how I look at children forever wasn't about an intruder at all. It was about the boy I was hired to watch. And to this day, I don't know if what I saw was him or something using him as a mask. The Walters lived in one of those carefully maintained houses at the edge of town. Pale blue shutters, trimmed hedges, porch lights that turned on automatically at dusk. Their neighborhood always looked safe, but something about their place felt staged. Like a model home nobody really lived in where everything was too perfect. The walls were white, no scuff marks, not a single family photo out of line. Even the air inside smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals, sharp enough to make me notice. Mrs. Walters answered the door in a hurry. She was dressed for a night out, hair pinned up, pearl necklace catching the light. "Thanks so much for coming on such short notice," she said, bringing me inside before I'd even set my bag down. She went through the instructions like she was reading them off a checklist. Oliver had eaten. Homework done. "Thanks for coming, Lauren," she said. "The kids will be easy. Chloe's 9, Daniel's 7. Snacks are in the kitchen. Bedtime at 9:30. She was halfway down the porch steps before I could ask anything else. Mr. Holloway was waiting in the truck with the engine running. They waved once, then disappeared down the drive, leaving me in silence with two kids looking at me from the living room doorway. Chloe had long dark hair and a serious expression that made her seem older than 9. Daniel clutched a stuffed truck and leaned against her, eyes bright and restless. They didn't say much at first, just led me into the living room where the TV hummed softly. The house inside felt wrong, too cold for summer. The hallway seemed to stretch a little too far. We passed the time with a board game and some popcorn. Chloe played carefully, thinking about every move, while Daniel cheated shamelessly and laughed at himself for it. For a while, it almost felt normal. But at 8:30, Chloe looked up suddenly and said, "Do you want to see the game the house likes?" I blinked. "The house likes a game?" She nodded seriously. "Hide and seek, but only at night." Daniel grinned. "It likes when we hide. If we don't, it gets mad." I laughed nervously, thinking they were making up stories the way kids do. But something about the way Chloe's eyes stayed locked on mine made me uneasy. "Well, no hide and seek tonight," I said firmly. "It's almost bedtime." The air seemed to press heavier after that, as if the walls were listening. By 9 o'clock, I got them upstairs. Their rooms were across the hall from each other, both with old wallpaper that curled at the seams. I tucked Daniel in first, then Chloe, who whispered as I pulled the blanket up. "If the lights go out, don't open the door." I tried to brush it off. "Sweet dreams, Chloe." Back downstairs, I curled up on the couch with my phone. That's when the first door slammed. Came from the kitchen. I jumped, hard in my throat, and rushed in, but every cabinet was closed. The back door was locked. The only thing out of place was the clock on the wall. His hands were spinning backwards, slow and steady. I swallowed hard and stepped back into the living room. The hall looked longer than it had before. Where there should have been 3 framed pictures, now there were 6. And the wallpaper pattern didn't match anymore. I told myself I was overtired, imagining things. But then the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the house. I fumbled for my phone flashlight. The beam sliced through the black. And that's when I heard footsteps upstairs. The kids. I ran up calling their names. Chloe, Daniel. But when I reached the top, both bedroom doors were closed tight. I pushed Daniel's open first. He was in bed, eyes wide, clutching his stuffed truck. "The house is playing," he whispered. Chloe's room was the same. She lay still, eyes glinting in the dim glow of her nightlight. "I told you not to open the door," she said softly. I shut it fast, my hands trembling. Back in the hall, I realized something that made my chest seize. At the far end was a window. Earlier, I'd seen the backyard through it. Now, when my flashlight beam hit the glass, it didn't show outside. It showed another hallway, the same one I was standing in. I staggered back, nearly tripping over myself. Every nerve in my body screamed to get out. I ran down the stairs to the front door, yanked it open, and froze. I wasn't looking at the porch. I was staring into the kitchen. Same checkered tile, same backward spinning clock. I slammed the door, gasping, opened it again. This time it opened into the upstairs hallway. Daniel's room at the end. "No," I whispered, slamming it shut. My pulse thundered. The house wasn't letting me leave. I grabbed the landline phone on the table and called 911 with shaking fingers. A voice answered. My voice, screaming. Raw, terrified screams that made my ears ring. I dropped the phone, heart hammering. The air grew heavy, pressing against me. The wallpaper seemed to breathe. The hum of electricity crawled under my skin. "Lauren!" I spun around. Both kids stood at the bottom of the stairs, pale and still. Chloe's eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. Daniel smiled faintly, but it wasn't his smile. "You should hide," Chloe said softly, "before it finds you." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The floorboards creaked as if something huge shifted beneath the house. The walls seemed closer, pressing in. I ran for the back door, dragging the kids with me. My hand fumbled with the lock, wrenched it open, and stared into the living room. Same couch, same phone dangling off the hook. "No," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "No, no, no." Chloe squeezed my hand. "It doesn't let people go unless it wants to." I tried every door, every window. Each one opened into another room of the house, sometimes into the same room I was already in. Once I opened a closet and found myself staring back at me, flashlight shaking in my own hand, my reflection grinning too wide. The rest of the night blurred into panic. I kept the kids close, praying for daylight. The house creaked and shifted, hallways stretching and folding. At one point, every clock in the house ticked backward in unison, the sound so loud it felt like needles in my ears. I pressed my hands over the kids' eyes when shadows slid across the walls, tall and thin, moving against the light. And then, just as suddenly, it was morning. The front door opened to the porch like nothing had happened. The Holloway's truck rolled up the drive, gravel crunching. Mrs. Holloway stepped out, waving, smiling like the world was normal. "Everything go okay?" she asked. I couldn't even answer. The kids ran to her, clinging to her waist. She kissed their heads and thanked me like nothing was wrong. I stumbled out to my car, pale and shaking. But before I drove off, I made the mistake of looking at the upstairs window. Through the glass, I saw myself, still inside, standing in the hallway with Chloe and Daniel clutching my hands. My reflection's mouth stretched into a silent scream as the curtains fell closed. I've told this story only once before, and the person I told stopped me halfway through. They said it sounded too much like a movie plot, too scripted, too impossible. But that's the part one can't get across. How normal it all felt at first, and how quickly the night spiraled into something I still wake up from, choking on my own breath. The Marshalls weren't strangers to me. I'd babysat their daughter Madison 3 times before. They were a well-off family, Big brick house on the edge of town. Perfectly mowed lawn. Even a stone fountain in the front yard that never seemed to stop running. Mr. Marshall was tall, quiet, polite in that rehearsed way. Mrs. Marshall was always in a rush, smiling but distracted. They treated me fairly, paid well, and Madison was sweet, a little shy, but smart and funny once you got her talking. That night started like any other. I pulled into their driveway at 6:45, the last of the summer sun bleeding out over the trees. The house looked warm, lights glowing in every downstairs window. Mrs. Marshall greeted me at the door in an elegant black dress, pearls around her neck. Mr. Marshall was behind her, fixing his cufflinks. "Thanks again, Kayla," she said breathlessly. "We'll be gone until midnight, maybe a little after. Madison's already eaten. One snack before bed if she asks. Bedtime's 9:30. I nodded, writing it in my mental checklist. No problem. They didn't stay. Mr. Marshall gave me a quick smile, and in another moment, the two of them were out the door, car headlights sweeping across the yard before disappearing down the road. Madison was on the living room floor coloring in a book. She looked up and smiled faintly. "Hi, Kayla." I dropped my bag on the couch. "Hey, kiddo, what are we drawing?" She showed me a half-finished unicorn with too many legs. I laughed and told her it looked magical, and for a while it felt like the start of any normal babysitting shift. But about an hour in, she said something that made the air shift. We were playing a card game at the coffee table. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't look out the windows after dark." I thought she was teasing. "Why not?" Her eyes flicked toward the big bay window in the living room where the night pressed against the glass. "Because if they see you looking, they'll come inside." I forced a laugh. "Who's they?" "The people who come at night." She went back to her cards like she hadn't said anything unusual. Chills prickled up my arms. I asked her more, but she wouldn't answer. Just shook her head and said, "Mommy says not to talk about them." By 9 o'clock, I tucked her into bed upstairs. She curled under her blanket, clutching a stuffed rabbit, eyes wide in the glow of her night light. "Kayla?" she asked as I started to close the door. "Yeah. If they knock, don't answer." I told her not to worry, that she was safe, but my stomach was tight as I went back down. At 9:27, the first knock came. Not on the front door, on the glass of the bay window. 3 slow taps. I froze on the couch, phone in hand. The curtains were drawn, but the sound was sharp, deliberate. I forced myself to peek through a crack. Shapes stood at the edge of the yard. 5, maybe 6 figures in dark cloaks, faces hidden. One stood closer than the rest, hands still pressed to the glass. I stumbled back, heart slamming in my chest. My first thought was to call the Marshalls. I dialed Mrs. Marshall's number, straight to voicemail. Mr. Marshall's too. The knock came again, louder. Then from upstairs, Madison's voice. "Don't let them see me." My hands shook as I grabbed the landline on the wall. I called 911. The line clicked and filled with chanting. Low, rhythmic voices overlapping like dozens of mouths mumbling at once. I slammed the phone down, my pulse hammering in my throat. By 10 o'clock, the house wasn't quiet anymore. I could hear movement on the porch, soft footsteps circling the walls. The doorknob rattled once, twice, then stopped. I ran upstairs, threw Madison's door open. She was sitting up in bed, rabbit clutched tight, eyes brimming with tears. "Kayla, they don't want me. They want you." I felt my blood run cold. "What do you mean?" She shook her head violently, whispering. "Mommy says it's always the babysitter. That's why she hires new ones. My throat went dry. "What are you talking about?" Her voice cracked. "It's the rule. If they don't get someone, they come inside and take us instead." Every hair on my body stood on end. My mind raced through every interaction I'd had with the marshals. How rushed they always were to leave. How they never stayed out later than midnight. A heavy thud shook the wall. Both of us screamed. The sound of wood splintering followed, like someone carving into the siding with a blade. I ran to the hall and saw black shapes moving past the upstairs windows. Too tall, too close. I grabbed Madison's hand and dragged her to the bathroom, locking the door. She sobbed into her rabbit while I tried to steady my breathing. The chanting started outside. Not muffled anymore. Inside the house. It came from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. My own name woven into it. Kayla, Kayla, Kayla. I pressed my hands over my ears, tears spilling down my face. Then came the scratching. Symbols carved into the wood of the door. Lines curling and crossing. Glowing faintly red as they were made. Madison screamed and I held her tighter, whispering it was okay, even though I didn't believe it. Then came the scratching. Symbols carved into the wood of the door. Lines curling and crossing. Glowing faintly red as they were made. Madison screamed and I held her tighter, whispering it was okay, even though I didn't believe it. Time melted. Minutes, maybe an hour of whispers, knocks, footsteps pacing just beyond the thin wood. My phone screen stayed dead no matter how many times I pressed it. Every light bulb in the house had gone black. At some point, the noise stopped. The silence was worse. I opened the door a crack. Flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The hall was empty, but the walls were covered in symbols, dripping faintly like fresh paint. Madison clutched my hand. "It's almost midnight. They'll go soon." I wanted to believe her. I held her until the first hint of headlights washed across the curtains. The Marshall's car. They came in like nothing had happened. Mrs. Marshall smiled at me, thanked me, handed me cash. Mr. Marshall nodded, checking his watch. Neither looked at the walls, at the symbols still carved there. Neither asked why Madison's face was streaked with tears. I stumbled out into the night air, shaking so hard I nearly fell. But before I reached my car, I stopped dead. The hood was smeared with bloody handprints. My name carved into the paint. Jagged letters deep enough to scar the metal. Kayla. I left that house, but I didn't leave it behind. Not really. Madison never spoke to me again. The Marshalls moved a few months later. No one knows where. And me. Every time I hear a knock at the window after dark, I don't look, because I know if I do, they'll come inside. And this time, there won't be anyone else for them to take.